It wasn't quite the busy opening day of free agency that the Bucs had last year, but nonetheless, there was still a lot of activity happening down at One Buc Place. For starters, they parted ways with Anthony Collins just 1 year into that 5-year deal worth $30 million. And meanwhile, they also re-signed two guys of their own, in Leonard Johnson as well as giving a tender to Bobby Rainey. Of course, they had already brought back Major Wright. They also brought back Danny Lansana, Lauren Sidbury, Jason Williams, and Larry English. For the most part, they were setting up some visits, and some of the key guys that they're going to be bringing in really within the next 24 hours are Henry Melton as well as Chris Conte, both guys that have some familiarity with Lovie Smith. They played in Chicago, and Melton also recently spent this past year with Lovie Smith's very best friend, Rod Marinelli, in Dallas. And speaking of Dallas, they're also bringing in inside linebacker Bruce Carter. Now that Mason Foster more than likely won't be re-signing with the Bucs, they have a vacancy there. But I would also look to them to possibly address this in the draft very early on too. And speaking of Melton, if they're going to part ways with Daquan Bowers, they really need to try and solidify that inside pass rush. Bringing in Melton could certainly do that. He's a guy that, despite the fact that he wasn't even really a starter last year, he was able to finish with 5 sacks. And then there's Raiders offensive lineman Stefan Wisniewski. Now, he's someone that can play both guard and center, and having some versatile offensive linemen is something the Bucs are really coveting, especially this past year. They did get some decent production out of Evan Dietrich Smith, but considering that he's also able to play guard, I expect them to try and bring this guy in and possibly flip-flop some guys around just to see which combinations work best. Another guy that I would be on the lookout for is Chief Safety Ron Parker. He's a guy that's drawing interest from a number of different teams, but they're going to try to get him in the building. And if you notice, the Bucs are bringing in a lot of pass rushers and also a lot of safeties. I think they're looking for possible options so that in the event that they do part ways with Deshaun Goldson, well, they have solutions. Which, speaking of Goldson, he's due to make $7.5 million in this coming year. If they did part ways with him, they would be on the hook for $4 million. That's a lot of money. Speaking of pricey salaries, Michael Johnson is due to make $5 million of his 2016 salary if he's still on the team on the third day of the league year. And a lot of that could be predicated on if they can land another pass rusher, a guy like Derek Morgan, who is scheduled to visit with the Bucs. He's currently in Atlanta right now, but the Bucs are going to be his next stop. So keep an eye out for Morgan, as well as safety Ron Parker, because there's going to be some domino effects that happen if both of those guys are able to sign, as well as Chris Conte. Speaking of departures, Adrian Clayborn's currently visiting with the Falcons right now. Also, Mason Foster is drawing some interest from a number of teams. Really interesting with him is that even though he's played in a 4-3 scheme throughout his whole NFL career from the time he was drafted by the Bucs, he's actually possibly looking into play in some 3-4 systems. So keep an eye out for that. A lot of people would automatically just assume he'd want to go to another 4-3 team, but I think he's going to get some looks as a 3-4 inside linebacker, and one of the teams that I'm hearing some interest is coming from is Chicago, so keep an eye out for that. As always, you want to keep checking back with Sports Talk Florida for all your NFL free agency news, not just the Bucs, but really the entire league. We'll definitely have you covered. With Sports Talk Florida, I'm Jenna Lane.